This week, I want to share content titled The Gut's Little Confessions from an incredibly useful book, which has been translated as Gut, the inside story of our body's most underrated organ by author Giulia Enders. She used humorous and witty language to convey complex scientific knowledge about gut health, making it incredibly easy and enjoyable to read. Immediately upon publication, this book broke sales records for health science books in Germany, with rights bought by 36 other countries, becoming a global bestseller. Many people think the gut is just an organ for storing food waste and aiding digestion. Most of us have very little knowledge about it and pay scant attention to its care. But in reality, the gut is one of the most important superorgans in your body. The only thing comparable to it in the human body is the brain, making the gut truly deserving of being called the second brain. If you suddenly feel unhappy for no clear reason, it's very likely that your gut's deep emotional sensitivity has flared up. It impacts your subconscious and affects your mood. This isn't a joke. Our bodies produce a happiness hormone called serotonin, a chemical that makes us feel happy, and 95% of the serotonin produced by the body comes from gut cells. That's why when you're unhappy, you always crave something delicious. However, when it comes to deciding what asterisk to eat, a spicy hot pot, crispy fried chicken, or rich, creamy cake, your brain doesn't get to decide. Instead, your gut tells your brain what it wants, and then your brain gives you the final instruction. A very valuable aspect of this book is that it doesn't just focus on the gut, but covers the entire digestive system. To fully understand the gut, we must first understand the whole system that contains it. The author begins with the mouth and esophagus, leading to the stomach, explaining the journey of food in the human body in the simplest way possible. In this journey, the role of each part is not simple. The relationship between saliva and the oral environment is directly linked to immunity. The relationship between Helicobacter pylori and the stomach lining affects digestive health, and so on. Giulia compares small daily habits with medical knowledge and transforms it all into engaging content in this book. When your gut is healthy, you won't need medicine. Illnesses can simply disappear. A healthy gut means smooth, glowing skin and a slender figure. These are incredibly positive things our gut silently does for us. So, it's time we understood the gut's miraculous journey to learn how to treat it well and appreciate it. We'll start with the first section, titled, You're Healthy When Your Stool is Normal. Stool is truly innocent. It cannot decide for itself whether to stay or go. Can you imagine? A petite, beautiful German woman, a medical doctor, wrote a popular science book starting with the story of stool. We too will begin today's content with a slightly smelly, but interesting, story, because whether your stool is healthy or not is very important for your body. What it smells like and what it looks like all convey information about your health. Defecation might seem simple, but it's actually a highly technical act. This action is not merely the simple expansion and contraction of the anus. It's a process completed through the cooperation of our two main nervous systems. The muscles that control the expansion and relaxation of the anus are called the external sphincter. This muscle part is controlled by our conscious will. The stronger our conscious will, the higher our ability to control it. It will obey your command and prevent stool from descending. For example, if you're driving and suddenly feel the urge to use the restroom, you certainly don't want to relieve yourself on the spot. Under your strong conscious awareness, the external sphincter will try to tighten. A few centimeters beyond the anus, there's a similar organ, the internal sphincter, but it's not controlled by our conscious will. When there's a strong urge to defecate, that's when the internal sphincter is telling you something. So, how does this process play out vividly in our bodies? When stool reaches the anal canal, it reflexively opens to prepare for the release of a vanguard army. At this point, the sensory cells between the two sphincters analyze the nature of this army wanting to escape. Is it solid or gas? Once determined, your brain collects visual, auditory, and environmental information. If everything isn't quite ready for you to release this vanguard army, the external sphincter will order the army not to exit. If you can't hold it, you can only release a little gas. The solid part remains. So, the external sphincter clamps down tighter. The internal sphincter senses the change and cooperates with the external sphincter to send the vanguard army back. After a while, the internal sphincter will check the situation again. As a result, you feel your urge to go getting stronger and stronger. After enduring with clenched teeth, you finally find a suitable place to release. At this point, the external and internal sphincters work together to send the vanguard army out without any obstruction. Holding in your stool puts both the internal and external sphincters under extreme tension. When you hold it, the external sphincter is heavily influenced by your conscious will. It can regain strength after being extremely tired and then re-enter a state of tension. But as the internal sphincter becomes increasingly fatigued, it can lose its motivation. In this way, the internal and external sphincters become difficult to communicate and connect with each other, and a direct consequence is constipation. That's why we shouldn't hold in stool to avoid this inevitable situation. The best way is to train yourself to go at a certain time of day that you can control. Our gut is extremely autonomous and remembers what we like to eat, when we wake up, and when we go to the bathroom. It then forms its own fixed biological clock, working and living earnestly. If everything falls within its biological clock schedule, it will be full of energy. But if you disrupt its biological clock, it will impose a penalty on you, making you pay with all sorts of discomforts. We need to know that the gut also has its own rules. If you make it follow the rules, there will be no problem. For example, if you always force the internal sphincter to push back the vanguard army, when it gets angry, it might not let them out anymore. If this happens, it will be incredibly troublesome. While the vanguard army stands waiting in the gut will also reabsorb some water. In this way, when expelled, the stool will become harder and harder. Next, let's determine if you are constipated. If you have fewer than 3 bowel movements a week and more than a quarter of the army in your stool is hard, or you feel that you haven't completely emptied your bowels during the process, then you are constipated. So, what kind of consistency should the vanguard army have to be considered good? Human stool usually consists of 75% water. Of the remaining solids, nearly 10% is gut flora, over 10% is indigestible plant fiber, and the remaining 10% is various other waste products in the body. Good quality stool should be yellowish-brown, soft like toothpaste in shape, with a smooth surface. When dropped into water, it should float first, then slowly sink to the bottom. This means it contains air bubbles, indicating a good gut microbiome. So, how can we minimize constipation? First, based on the composition of stool as I mentioned, you need to drink more water. Only with sufficient hydration can our stool be soft. After that, you need to increase your fiber intake. Fiber acts as an excellent massager. Fiber is divided into insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is typically found in the outer layers of vegetables and fruits. It provides energy to strongly stimulate intestinal peristalsis. Soluble fiber is found in the pulp of vegetables and fruits. It's relatively mild and will soften the stool. Therefore, in our daily diet, we should try to eat all the outer layers of vegetables and fruits, such as apples, cucumbers, etc. However, modern farming often uses excessive pesticides and chemicals, so if we have the means, we should eat organic fruits and vegetables for the best assurance. The third thing we can do to minimize constipation is to walk and exercise more. Researchers have shown that high-intensity exercise can promote bowel movements to a certain extent. If you are someone who exercises regularly but suddenly stops for some reason, your gut will also become lazy. Therefore, we can deduce that if someone doesn't exercise much but experiences constipation, it's best to start exercising at a high intensity until you sweat. Finally, we need to consider whether our bowel movements are done correctly and scientifically. Our bowel contraction mechanism is not suitable for sitting to defecate. An Israeli doctor once demonstrated through experiments that squatting in a pit results in shorter and more comfortable defecation times. Daily, we sit comfortably and for a long time on the toilet, trying our best to expel the vanguard army. But at the same time, when you struggle to defecate, you can push out hemorrhoids. If you strain too much at this moment, you are more likely to experience varicose veins, stroke, or fainting during defecation. So a simple solution is to place a small stool under your feet, lean forward slightly, mimicking a skier's posture. If you don't have a stool, you can also bring your upper body close to your knees, then sit upright again. Repeat this motion as much as possible. However, if the above methods still don't resolve constipation, you should see a doctor for treatment. While this sounds simple, not everyone takes it seriously. The latest health data shows that chronic constipation patients account for 18% of the Vietnamese population, with 8% needing hospital visits. Many of us suffer from constipation, but most people always believe that constipation is not a problem. However, if constipation does not subside, it will lead to new physical problems that you cannot foresee. Therefore, you must take this issue very seriously. Next, in the second part, we will discuss the gut's confessions and worries, that the second brain desperately needs you to be happy. Scientific studies prove that the dominant brain controls the human body, but it is not the sole ruler. The gut also impacts brain activity. Early research by neuroscientists showed that the number of neurons in the entire human gut is 10 times greater than the number of neurons in the spinal cord. Not only that, the gut can send signals to different areas of the brain. If the brain is the president working in a high-level office, the skull containing the brain, then our gut is the foreign expert on the front lines. The gut's job is to interact with hormones, immune cells, and gut bacteria in the blood, collecting information and transmitting it via the vagus nerve pathway so the brain can stay in its office without needing to leave. Therefore, it can be said that our gut constantly influences the brain and also has a close connection with our emotions. That's why ancient people called feelings of pain heartache. Moreover, since the gut is an independent expert operating abroad, this organ has exclusive rights and is not afraid of being controlled by the brain. That's why there are some things the gut's nerves will not report in detail to the brain. For example, if I eat watermelon today and accidentally swallow some seeds, the gut nerves will never report such trivial matters. However, if there is a special event, there must be a specific arrangement. For example, when you drink too much alcohol and the gut cannot tolerate it, the gut nerves will report to the brain's vomiting center. If our gut is constantly uncomfortable, the gut nerves will continue to send negative information about the discomfort of the digestive tract to the brain. These negative signals will activate areas in the brain that control negative emotions, making our mood worse. That's why when we are unwell, we often feel gloomy. Conversely, if the brain encounters difficult problems, it needs to borrow a little extra energy from elsewhere to solve them. At this time, the gut becomes the brain's first choice. The brain will communicate with the gut nerves via another pathway. The sympathetic nerves will urge the gut to do something special. This could be vomiting and rapid expulsion of food in the digestive tract. Vomiting or diarrhea in this case is called emotional vomiting and emotional diarrhea. However, emotions are temporary, but stress is long-lasting. If there's no energy for digestion, you won't be able to eat, or the food you eat won't have enough digestive fluids. If digestive activity is reduced for a long time, the intestinal wall will become fragile due to insufficient blood supply, and the protective function of the mucous membrane will decrease. Immediately after, the gut microbiota and immune cells will also become imbalanced. If these two things are messed up, the environment in the gut will be chaotic. At this point, a chain reaction occurs, and the final result is that you lose your appetite and feel sluggish all over. The most notable thing is that even after your stress subsides, gut health cannot recover immediately. It takes a lot of time to restore the digestive environment. Poor gut health will affect your mood and make you feel unhappy. This is a vicious cycle leading to serious consequences. Therefore, based on what I've analyzed above, we can improve our health by changing small habits in life. The ancients had a saying, "Even if the sky falls, don't miss a meal." No matter what terrible things you are facing when you eat, don't bring a heavy mind. Instead, enjoy your meal mindfully and relaxed. Don't bring unpleasant matters, quarrels, conflicts, and disagreements to your meal. Many people also have a habit of eating when sad, crying and eating until they choke, or eating under stress and anxiety, unable to swallow. This will severely damage your gut health and yourself. A book titled 7 Responsibilities for Children states that children's gut and brain develop at the same time, so even if a child is a little mischievous, parents should not put too much pressure on them while eating, and don't rush to scold or reprimand them. In short, the gut does a lot of hard work for the brain, but always silently hides its credit and reputation. Conversely, the state of the gut will directly affect the brain. When you lose emotional control, prolonged sadness, anxiety, and stress will harm the gut, and the gut will continue to feed negative emotions back to the brain, making people continue to feel unhappy. To improve this situation, you need to learn to be calm while eating. In my personal experience, practicing mindfulness while eating will help you achieve this. After all, for the gut, what we eat is the most important thing. So, in the final part of this content, we will explore what the gut likes to eat. The food we consume mainly includes carbohydrates, fats, and fiber to promote the contraction of the small intestine. Of all energy sources, carbohydrates come from fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, sprouts, and legumes, all made up of sugar molecules. This is the easiest to digest and absorb, providing energy to the body most quickly, but it also causes hunger most easily because it is not a sustainable energy source. Therefore, eating too much rice does not necessarily mean you stay full for long. Many people have a habit of eating a lot of white rice and cooking salty dishes to eat with it. This habit is actually not good. Carbohydrates are actually chains of sugar molecules. After these sugar molecules enter our body, the body easily breaks them down to provide energy. A portion of the energy provided will be converted into glycogen for storage or converted into fat. Next, let's talk about fats. Typically, people who want to lose weight hate fats, but our body, on the contrary, needs fat. For the same weight, fat provides twice as much energy as carbohydrates. Our body has a conscious need to conserve. It automatically stores fat as a reserve when needed. And when the carbohydrate supply in the body is depleted, the body begins to use fat for its own energy. In addition, fat surrounds our nerve cells and also provides energy for nerve cells, making our thinking sharper. This is also why many students, despite not dieting or exercising much, are not fat, because thinking also consumes fat. Moreover, fat tissue is also where steroid hormones are metabolized, which have complex and strong endocrine functions and can produce many substances and proteins. We often see some celebrities losing so much weight that they experience endocrine disorders, and some cannot conceive due to being too thin. This is because they have underestimated fat. However, we also need to pay attention to one thing. Other nutrients we consume normally need to be sent via the bloodstream to the liver for detoxification, but fat does not work that way. If fat passes through the cardiovascular system, it will clog the cardiovascular system. Imagine droplets of oil sticking in the bright red blood flow. It will cause blockages. Therefore, a problem we need to take very seriously is the quality of the cooking oil and fats we consume and absorb daily. These fats do not go through the detoxification process by the liver. Therefore, if this fat contains toxins or pathogenic bacteria, it is equivalent to your heart directly receiving these toxins and pathogenic bacteria. Many of us don't want to cook. We just order takeout or eat out. This is very easy and convenient, but we also have to face the problem that due to cost, most restaurants do not use good cooking oil. They use lard or repeatedly processed oils to fry food. These problematic oils accumulate in your lymphatic system over time and will make your body struggle to endure, causing many types of diseases. Then, our body also needs protein. Protein is made up of rearranged amino acids. All types of protein we eat daily cannot actually be directly consumed. Only after being digested into amino acids by digestive enzymes in the small intestine can protein be absorbed. Amino acids can also be obtained directly from food, but most foods do not contain enough amino acids. This is also why nutritionists around the world advise us to have a balanced diet. Only when you eat enough protein, fruits, vegetables, grains, etc., can you find a way to get enough amino acids. In addition, you need to know that amino acids are not only used to synthesize protein, they also help improve the immune system and synthesize many necessary hormones for the body. In summary, you will find that the gut prefers a balanced diet. The book Healing Diet, Healing Fast emphasizes that the true key to health lies in balance. For modern people today, eating to heal illness or maintain health is not about dieting, rejecting fat, completely eliminating sugar to lose weight quickly, or eating any miracle food. On the contrary, the first thing we need to pay attention to is not eating too much. Eat natural foods, avoid excessively processed foods, eat good fats, and consume a moderate amount of protein. Control refined sugar intake, or ideally, abstain from sugar from high-carbohydrate foods including white rice, flour, bread, pasta, etc., and foods containing refined sugar. Instead, let's eat more natural carbohydrates from high-fiber foods such as vegetables and fruits to reduce the burden of energy metabolism. At this point, there's a very important part we need to consider: the food the gut loves most: fiber. Besides the three main energy sources the body likes, our small intestine absolutely loves fiber. Imagine this: when you look at Earth from space, you see a beautiful planet. You see oceans and land, but you cannot see the ships on the sea or the plants growing on mountaintops. Similarly, when you look at the people next to you, you can see their hair, skin, eyes, and hands, but you cannot see the bacteria living on their bodies. Someone created a distribution map of bacteria on the human body, much like mapping the population of Earth. The results show that 99% of the types of bacteria on the human body can be found in the small intestine, of which 95% are harmless and beneficial bacteria. If we consider the small intestine as a city, its nervous system is the mayor, and the city's residents are the gut bacteria. These residents play a decisive role in the development of the entire city, and they also determine our health. Every day, these bacterial residents contribute to building the city of the small intestine. When beneficial bacteria thrive, the small intestine is healthy. When the small intestine is healthy, your health is better assured. Moreover, the gut microbiota can also build the immune system. You would hardly imagine that most of our immune system is actually located in the small intestine, accounting for 80% of the body's entire immune system. In supporting digestion in the small intestine, bacteria also synthesize many necessary vitamins and minerals, then send them throughout the body via the circulatory system. This is why we must protect our small intestinal bacteria. So, what specifically do we need to do here? First, eat more fiber-rich foods, vegetables, and fruits daily. This is the best, most scientific way to protect our small intestine. The recommended amount for Vietnamese people is at least 20-25 grams of fiber per day, but achieving this is not easy, especially for people who work or study outside. To know if you're eating enough fiber in a day, you can use nutrition tracking and analysis apps on your phone. For example, in one day, you might need to eat 1 large sweet potato, 30 g of oats, 100 g of peas, 100 g of carrots, 200 g of green vegetables, 1 pear, 1 apple, and 100 g of tomatoes to consume enough 25 g of fiber in a day. Here we need to understand why fiber is so important, why we must eat so much fiber. Firstly, fiber softens stool. Secondly, fiber is the gut bacteria's favorite food. The special thing is that after beneficial bacteria consume fiber from food, they can multiply, whereas harmful bacteria cannot do so. What happens if you consume too little dietary fiber and only like to eat meat and fish? Imagine your small intestine as a desolate island in the ocean. Without a supply of fiber, and if it only has meat and fish, which take longer and are harder to digest, this ocean island in your gut will become hot and emit a rather unpleasant fishy smell. Moreover, the health of the small intestine will fall into a critical, dangerous state, with the highest risk leading to colorectal cancer and other dangerous diseases. Therefore, avoid eating too much fried, oily food, and instead increase your daily intake of vegetables and fiber-rich foods. Finally, let's give our gut more quiet time. As I mentioned earlier, your gut nerves are not controlled by the brain. For example, when you eat a piece of cake, your brain can control your chewing muscles to help you crush the food, but once this cake enters your stomach, the brain stops controlling it. The gut nerves are responsible for all activities in the digestive system and are entirely self-governed. Under the control of the gut nerves, your stomach begins to contract, and the small intestine continues to move food. The small intestine's only task is to push undigested food further along. During this pushing process, it mixes and digests the undigested food with its folds. The small villi on these folds continuously absorb until all food has been digested and only food remnants remain. The small intestine then switches to an automatic cleaning mode to hand all remnants over to the large intestine for processing. After that, the small intestine returns to a clean, sparkling state and is ready to rest. If you frequently cannot control snacking or eating unhealthy fast food, your stomach and gut will not have the opportunity to self-clean, leading to many serious health problems. Here's an important piece of information. When excess food enters the large intestine, it is slowly broken down over 16 hours under the action of the gut microbiota. You might be surprised. 16 hours, that's so long. Does that mean I shouldn't eat anything for 16 hours? However, let's not be dissatisfied with the slow pace of the large intestine. It truly has to work very hard with the enormous amount of food residue daily. The large intestine does not operate as cheerfully as the small intestine. It works very silently. Its surface has no villi, but is instead covered with immune cells. That's why it needs a high amount of quiet time to minimize the number of harmful bacteria and provide ample space for beneficial bacteria to thrive, offering a comfortable living environment for the gut microbiota. Therefore, the friendliest way to treat your large intestine is to leave it alone, not disturb it, so it can slowly decompose the food remnants transferred from the small intestine, digest them within 16 hours, fully absorb minerals, trace minerals, and vitamins, and then turn the leftover food into stool for expulsion. For the past 6 months, I have started practicing 16/8 intermittent fasting and gradually made it a regular lifestyle. 16/8 intermittent fasting is not a diet or a method of restricting calorie-containing food consumption, as many websites suggest, but a balanced eating method that consumes all necessary daily calories within an 8-hour window, while fasting for the remaining 16 hours. Typically, I start eating at 9 a.m. and finish my last meal of the day at 5 p.m. This time frame is actually not difficult to maintain and is very suitable for people who work or study. Going to bed on an empty stomach gives you a wonderful feeling spreading through your body. Practicing intermittent fasting also helps me maintain my figure, physical health, and smoother, rosier skin, and especially improves stomach and gut health significantly. Previously, I had a very high amount of H. pylori bacteria. After treatment and intermittent fasting, this bacteria is no longer in my body. If you are interested in adopting a healthier eating plan, you can learn more about intermittent fasting to find what suits your schedule. This book, a popular science work, contains many more fascinating details and health insights. It truly encourages you to read and explore it yourself to apply to your daily eating habits. Moreover, by reading this book, you'll find answers to questions like, why does bad breath occur? Why do we burp? Why do we experience acid reflux? Why do we vomit? Why do we get motion sickness? Why is the appendix removed? Why are tonsils removed? Why do we fight H. pylori bacteria? And so on. All the answers are in this book. A joyful mood is a panacea for health. Moderate and proper eating is a wonderful medicine for health. Exercise is an investment in health, and habits are the source of health. Health, in turn, will bestow upon you a destiny full of happiness and miracles. May we all learn to cherish our physical and mental health.